Welcome to Late Night Horror Stories and True Crime. Tonight, we open the first chapter in a new series, one rooted in real events too disturbing for most to believe. This is episode 1 of the Vatican Archives, a case pulled from church records, sealed for decades. A family haunted, a house infested, and an exorcism that nearly broke the man sent to stop it. Turn off the lights, and whatever you do, don't look at the ceiling. There are houses that keep secrets, and then there are houses that whisper them. The home on Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania didn't whisper. It watched. And what the Smurl family moved into that summer had been waiting a very long time. The Smurls weren't looking for a miracle, just a fresh start. After a brutal flood displaced them from their previous home, Jack and Janet Smurl, their 2 daughters, and Jack's elderly parents packed up everything they owned and moved into a modest duplex at 328 to 330 Chase Street. 2 homes side by side, connected by thin walls and a shared past. Jack's parents, John and Mary, took one side. Jack, Janet, and the girls lived in the other. It wasn't perfect. The plumbing gurgled, wallpaper peeled, and a soft, persistent stench of something rotting seemed to cling to the upstairs hallway no matter how often Janet cleaned. But it was home, for a while. Janet was the first to notice it. Late one night, while folding laundry, she saw the hallway light flicker. Not a normal flicker, but a sharp strobe pulsing in a steady rhythm. She reached for the switch, and the bulb exploded. Glass rained down and the room went dark. In the silence, she heard it, a soft dragging sound above her, like something crawling through the ceiling. But there was no attic above that room, just roof. She called out to Jack, but he was fast asleep downstairs. The dog, a quiet, aging mutt named Ranger, whimpered at the base of the stairs, ears flat, tail tucked, refusing to come up. She told herself it was just the wind. Over the following days, the house began to shift. Doors closed on their own. The television would flicker, even unplugged. At night, the girls would cry out, claiming to hear someone whispering their names from the closet. When Jack checked, there was nothing there. And then the smell returned, stronger. A wet, coppery stink that seemed to bleed from the walls. Janet poured bleach along every baseboard. It made no difference. In October, during a storm, a section of the drywall in the upstairs hallway cracked and peeled. Behind it, they found black mold, thick, veined, and oddly symmetrical, like it had grown in a pattern. Jack carved away a piece and found what looked like a fingerprint, pressed into the wood behind it. The smell grew stronger. That night, the youngest daughter, Dawn, screamed from her bedroom. When Janet rushed in, she found Dawn standing on the bed, pointing at the ceiling. "There's a man in the corner," she said, pale with fear. "He's upside down." Janet turned. There was nothing, but the temperature in the room had dropped nearly 20 degrees. One morning, John and Mary Smurl knocked on their side of the duplex in a panic. John's recliner had moved across the living room while he was napping. Mary said she saw a shadow crawl out of the kitchen sink. The family called in an electrician, a plumber, even a local handyman. None of them would return after the first visit. By the spring of 1975, the home had begun to change its rules. Jack would enter the bathroom and find the mirror fogged over as though someone had just showered. But no one had. Sometimes, he would see his reflection move just a second too late. In July, it reached a new level. Jack awoke one night at 3:15 a.m. Something was breathing in the room. He turned his head slowly and froze. Above the bed, clinging to the ceiling like a bat, was a figure. Not human. Blackened skin, long, emaciated limbs. Its face was contorted, half its jaw unhinged, the mouth too wide, eyes glowing dull red, and it was watching Janet sleep. Jack couldn't speak, couldn't move. The thing smiled, then crawled, in reverse, across the ceiling and vanished into the wall. He kept that to himself for weeks. The days grew tense. Janet began waking up with bruises she couldn't explain. Faint, hand-shaped marks around her ankles, across her shoulders. She wrote them off at first. Stress, fatigue, sleepwalking. But Jack knew better. He'd seen her sleep. She barely moved. Then the lights started flickering every night at the same time. 3:15 a.m., not just in their home, but in both sides of the duplex. And then, one evening, the dog was gone. Ranger, old, faithful, and mostly deaf, vanished without a sound. The back door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry, only a trail of paw prints on the kitchen linoleum that ended at the pantry, and nowhere else. Janet searched for hours. Nothing. That night, Dawn came into their room and said, "The man said the dog went upstairs." But there was no upstairs, just the crawl space above the ceiling. Jack went up with a flashlight, bat in hand. He found claw marks on the beams. The noises grew louder, sobbing in the walls, knocking that followed you from room to room, doors that locked from the inside. Even the crucifix above the family Bible twisted itself upside down overnight. No one had touched it. On Sunday morning during prayer, Mary Smurl saw Jack's face shift. For just a second she swore his mouth moved independently from his words, like a ventriloquist dummy. His eyes clouded, not white, not red, but empty, like glass filled with smoke. She gasped and made the sign of the cross. He blinked, looked at her, and asked why she was crying. One night in September, Janet was preparing dinner when she heard Jack scream from upstairs. She ran up and found him curled in the hallway, mouth open, eyes wide, completely silent. He was frozen, as if mid-convulsion. Then he rose into the air, 6 inches, then 10. Then the light exploded above him. He dropped, gasping, thrashing, and screamed one word, "Get out!" He wasn't speaking to her. He was speaking to something behind her. Janet turned. There was no one there. But the mirror at the end of the hall, the one bolted to the wall, shattered inward, like something had pushed through it. Janet made the call the next morning. Not to the police, not to the diocese. To a woman she'd read about once in a newspaper article about hauntings. Lorraine Warren. She picked up on the second ring. "Something's in our home," Janet said, her voice shaking. "It wants us gone." "No," Lorraine replied. "If it wanted you gone, you'd be gone. It wants something else. They say the devil doesn't knock. He enters through the cracks. And on Chase Street, the cracks weren't in the walls. They were in the people." Some spirits haunt a place. Others dig in. They root themselves in walls, in memories, in grief, and they feed. The thing in the Smurl house didn't knock or creak or whisper. It burrowed, and by the time the Warrens arrived, it had already begun to multiply. Lorraine Warren had seen many homes like the one on Chase Street, but as she stood outside the Smurl duplex, hands clasped tightly around her rosary, she couldn't help but whisper to Ed, "It's watching us." Her husband gave a single nod. "It always is." The Smurls met them at the door. Janet, gaunt, exhausted, her hands trembling even when she wasn't moving. Jack, alert but twitchy, his voice too loud in the wrong places. And Mary and John, silent, as if worn down into ghosts themselves. The moment Lorraine crossed the threshold, she stopped. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Ed nodded. It was cold, but not in a way that could be measured. Not wind, not temperature, a spiritual vacuum. A kind of reverse presence, like something was sucking energy inward. As they moved through the house, Lorraine stopped again in the hallway upstairs. She placed her hand on the wall and closed her eyes. "There's something in here. Something that doesn't belong," Janet whispered. "The mold?" Lorraine shook her head. "Number not mold, not rot. A door. A door with no key." That night, the Warrens stayed in the house. Ed set up analog recording equipment in 4 rooms. Lorraine kept prayer candles burning. At 3:15 a.m., the house came alive. The smell returned first, sweet and metallic like rotting fruit soaked in blood. Then, scratching in the walls, not rats, bigger. Footsteps above the ceiling, multiple sets. The crucifix in the hallway spun on the nail and launched across the room, embedding in the drywall like a thrown dagger. And then, the ceiling bulged, as if something was crawling inside it, pushing the plaster down with its limbs. Lorraine ran to the stairs and screamed for Jack just as the kitchen cabinet burst open, throwing pots and pans across the floor in a violent cascade. And then the whispering began, from inside the walls. "We live here now. We live here now. We live here now." The next morning, Jack's behavior shifted. He didn't recognize Lorraine. He stood in the hallway for nearly an hour, facing the wall, muttering Latin phrases no one had ever taught him. When Ed touched his shoulder, Jack spun with unnatural speed, his mouth pulled back into a smile too wide, his teeth fully exposed. And then he collapsed. His eyes turned upward, white and glassy. "You won't remove me," he hissed. "You'll join me." Lorraine placed her hand over his chest and began the prayer of St. Michael. Jack screamed, not in pain, but as if something inside him was being burned. Later, that evening, while examining the upstairs hallway, Ed tapped on the drywall behind the mold, and a thick black liquid oozed out. It ran down the surface like oil, but smelled like sulfur and dead animals. Lorraine backed away, face pale. "This house isn't haunted," she said. "It's infested." And somewhere inside the wall, they heard breathing. Some demons wait to be summoned, others invite themselves. And in West Pittston, the thing in the wall wasn't waiting to be cast out. It was waiting for a host. Possession isn't always immediate. Sometimes it comes in waves, creeping in through memory, anger, guilt, until the body is only a suit of flesh. And in the house on Chase Street, 3:15 a.m. wasn't just a time, it was a door. And it opened every night. Jack Smurl stopped sleeping. He tried, at first, but by early March he was surviving on 2, maybe 3 hours a night, waking in cold sweats, his chest tight, whispering words Janet didn't understand. The doctor said it was stress, prescribed something to help him rest, but the pills only made the visions worse. He'd close his eyes and see the house burning, the walls pulsing, and something tall and black standing just outside the bedroom door, waiting. Always waiting. March 11th, 1976, 3:15 a.m. The lights flickered. The crucifix above the bed spun twice, then dropped. Jack sat up, eyes open, blank. He stood slowly and walked to the hallway. Janet, half asleep, watched him. He wasn't walking like himself. His head twitched, jerking left and right. His shoulders slouched forward, his feet dragged like dead weight. And then he turned toward her. His face was wrong. Not monstrous, not deformed, just off, like a mask being pulled too tight. And he smiled. "Do you want to see what I brought back?" he whispered, voice layered, his and another deeper one underneath. Then he turned and walked into the bathroom. Janet followed a minute later, heart pounding. She found Jack standing in front of the mirror, staring into his own reflection, not moving. The reflection was moving on its own, breathing faster, tilting its head in unnatural ways. Jack blinked. The reflection didn't. Then it smiled wider, cracked its neck sideways, and mouthed something Janet didn't hear, but felt. That's when the bathroom door slammed behind her. She turned and tried the knob. Locked. "Jack," she whispered. "He's not here," said the reflection. Janet screamed. The next day, Jack didn't remember any of it. He had vague flashes like dreams, but couldn't piece them together. He swore he never went into the bathroom. But the mirror had fractures in it, tiny stress cracks radiating from the center, and a word scratched into the glass. Join. By April, Jack was losing time. He'd drive to work and arrive hours late, with no memory of where he'd been. He began waking up in different rooms of the house, sometimes in the basement, standing in the dark with his back to the wall. Once Janet found him sitting cross-legged on the kitchen table, eyes rolled back, whispering to someone who wasn't there. When she touched him, he hissed like an animal and jerked away. His voice was no longer just his. Sometimes it echoed, delayed, as if someone else were trying to speak through him. One night, during a particularly violent storm, Jack walked into the living room where Lorraine Warren was conducting a prayer session. Without warning, he collapsed and began levitating. 6 inches, then a full foot off the floor. His body arched backward, arms outstretched, his face twisted, jaw unhinging, nose flattening, one eye swelling shut while the other opened impossibly wide. Then his lips began to move, but no sound came out. Lorraine stepped forward, crucifix raised, and whispered, "In the name of Christ, I command you, speak your name." The air thickened, cold, still, and then Jack whispered with a smile, "We are already inside." Possession doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it's just a man who forgets who he is, one moment at a time. And when Jack Smurl began to forget, something else remembered. You don't walk into a haunted house with a flashlight. You walk in with faith. But what the Warrens found in the Smurl home wasn't just a haunting. It was a system, a network of voices, shadows, and malice. And as they pressed record, the house pressed back. Lorraine Warren had been scratched before. She'd heard growls in empty basements, felt cold spots around rosaries, even blacked out once during a séance in Bridgeport. But this was something else entirely. The Smurl home didn't just house evil. It distributed it, like blood through veins. Ed set up 4 cassette recorders, 3 Polaroid cameras, and an EMF scanner, state-of-the-art for the time. He focused on the hallway, the master bedroom, and the shared wall between the duplex units. Lorraine fasted and prayed. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, everything did. Audio recordings, 3:15 a.m. The tapes captured footsteps, heavy and wet, pacing back and forth. A child's voice whispered, "Where's my face?" Then, on the hallway mic, a raspy, gravel-filled voice screamed a single word, "Out!" But no one had spoken in the house at that moment. Ed rewound the tape, played it again. The voice didn't just scream, it echoed from inside the walls. One Polaroid snapped by the master bedroom captured a blurry humanoid shape crouched on the ceiling above the bed. No legs, just arms, stretched long and tapering into claws. Lorraine's hands shook when she held the photo. The image was cold to the touch. That same night, Lorraine was violently thrown from her chair during a quiet moment of prayer. Her back struck the wall with such force that the wooden panel behind her cracked. When Ed rushed to help her, she was murmuring in a low voice, not her own. "He's not a demon," she whispered. "He's older. He has no name, only numbers." When she came to, she had 4 claw marks across her shoulder, beneath her blouse, beneath her coat. No one saw her touched. Church interference Ed contacted the Diocese of Scranton, demanding an official exorcism. They declined. "Lack of sufficient evidence," they wrote. The Warrens sent photos, audio, eyewitness accounts, silence. Then 2 weeks later, a man in a grey overcoat showed up at their hotel. No name, no badge, just a statement. "Stop. The church is watching this house. You're not the only ones." He left a card, no number, no address, only 2 words, Vatican liaison. On April 22, 1977, during another session, Lorraine entered a trance. She saw visions of tunnels beneath the house, old stone passageways filled with teeth and voices. When she opened her eyes, she gasped. The ceiling above the Smurl's dining table had split open, not physically, but visually. Everyone in the room saw it, a jagged black hole, tearing open like a paper seam. And from within, a face leaned out, not animal, not human, just wrong, faceless but moving, shifting, as if made of ash and screams. And then it spoke. "You can pray until your lungs burst. I have already taken root." The room exploded into chaos, chairs flung, the crucifix burst into flames, one of the cameras melted from the inside out. The lights died. You don't provoke something ancient without cost. And in the Smurl house, the cost was now clear. This wasn't about ghosts. This wasn't about evil. This was about infestation, and the countdown had begun. The church is cautious by design. It investigates, it delays, it denies. But sometime, when the thing inside the walls stops hiding, when it starts calling out names in the dark, one priest is sent in alone, not to investigate, not to negotiate, but to drive it out. By 1986, the Smurls had survived nearly a decade of torment. They'd tried everything: therapy, confession, relocation, even silence. But no matter what they did, the thing came with them. Jack's episodes had worsened. He now slipped into fugue states weekly, his face distorting, voice layered and gravelly, body twitching in unnatural patterns, like a puppet with its strings tangled. Janet's hands were covered in rosary burns, from gripping them too tightly during fits of unseen pressure in the kitchen. The walls still breathed, and sometimes the smell would return, sweet, sulfuric, and wet, as if something had opened beneath the floor. His real name was Father Malachi Brennan, though he went only by Malachi now. He wasn't from the Diocese of Scranton. He wasn't from Pennsylvania. He came from far west, assigned to quiet cases. No records, no follow-ups. The Vatican did not send him. They allowed him. He was 52, eyes sunken but alert, a burn scar down his left forearm shaped like a snake's spine. He carried no suitcase, only a black book bound in human skin, and a crucifix older than the nation. He walked into the Smurl home on a Wednesday and said, "If it speaks, do not answer. If it smiles, do not run." Then he sealed the door behind him. The exorcism began at 3 p.m. in the living room. Jack was strapped to a chair with belts, arms tied to the legs with torn bedsheets soaked in holy water. The room was lined with salt. Mirrors were covered, candles placed at each cardinal point. Malachi began praying in Latin. Jack immediately screamed, but his mouth didn't open. The sound came from his stomach, a howling, shrill tone that made the glass in the windows crack. Janet collapsed to her knees, weeping. The walls moaned. The floor pulsed beneath their feet like something breathing from below. At 3:15 p.m., Jack's body convulsed. His back arched, his arms dislocated, but he didn't scream. Instead, his mouth slowly opened, wider than humanly possible. His jaw crackled, dislocated. And from inside came not words, but voices. Dozens, layered, screaming, whispering, laughing. "We are not legion. We are the root. The silence that comes before the voice, the dark before the word." Jack's face began to stretch, rippling like soft wax. One eye turned black. The other rolled back white. His spine cracked 3 times, folding him nearly in half. Then he levitated. 3 feet off the chair, arms twisted, legs bent backward, body forming a shape that should not have existed. The candles blew out. The crucifix above the fireplace exploded. Malachi pressed forward. "I command you, leave this vessel. Return to the void from which you came." And the thing inside Jack laughed, in Lorraine's voice, in Dawn's voice, in Janet's voice, all at once. "We're not inside him, he's inside us." Malachi removed a relic from his coat, a small glass vial of sacred soil from Golgotha. He smashed it at Jack's feet. There was a flash of heat, a burst of wind that blew every door in the house wide open. The walls screamed, not creaked, screamed, as if torn from within. And then, silence. Jack collapsed, still, breathing but unconscious. Jack would never fully remember what happened that day. Malachi left before sunrise, saying only, "You may live here again, but do not pray in the walls. It remembers your names." The house sat still after that. No more voices, no more flickering, just a house. Janet eventually moved. The children grew up, but the duplex on Chase Street still stands. The left unit has remained vacant since 1987. And, the neighbors say, sometimes at 3:15 a.m., you can hear someone pacing the hallway, upside down. Some say evil never truly dies, it waits. Not in hell, but in the corners of places we forget. And the Smurls, they didn't forget. Not ever. Case file closed. The Vatican Archives status. Exorcism performed. Activity dormant. Location sealed. No further investigation authorized. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Vatican Archives, here on Late Night Horror Stories and True Crime. If you enjoy the content, kindly hit the like button and subscribe for more stories pulled from the darkest corners of history, faith, and fear. New episodes drop regularly, and trust me, they only get stranger from here. Until next time, sleep with one eye open and never ignore the sound coming from inside the walls.